All right. So, thank you so much for having me. And I know that I'm standing between you and beer. So I realize that's bad for me. But I'll try to get through this. I also tried to go for the most buzzworthy title. I think I won, if you can agree. I also tried to go for the longest one. I'm fairly like in the lead there. Unfortunately, the GraphQL guys beat me, so I have to do better next year if I'm accepted, obviously. But yeah, that's going to be one of the parameters. I'm sure. So briefly about me. This is me before I started learning about AI. Now I have a beard and the deep depression. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I grew up always wanting to be a programmer. So I love programming. I've done that my entire life, as far as I can remember, at least. So I figured out I wanted to do some education. I wanted to go down that path. And suddenly realized, information security is way, way cooler. Started playing some CTFs, as Ryan has mentioned. I won some of them. I also played with people here, which is also very, very cool. I started working as an information security consultant. I've been doing that for professionally for 7, 8 years. Been playing CTFs for 10 or something. And decided 2 years and 9 months ago to start my own pen test company, as Ryan also mentioned. Now, if you're coming here, what's important to mention here is I don't have like a PhD in AI or something. So if you're here and you know a ton of stuff about AI, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to look at this from kind of a practical approach, but also kind of forward-looking. Andre touched on a lot of cool topics that I'm also getting into, but I won't spoil it. The point is, I drove here, so I didn't have a chance to bring it with me. But I have a picture of it because this is going to be fairly high level. I'm a dad, so yeah, sorry. Now, the title contains the word offensive security, and so I want to try to define that quickly before going ahead. Now, back in the days, we kind of separate between the red team and the blue team. The red team being the people attacking stuff, and the blue team being the people defending them. And I know we have a wide variety, or in the audience here today. So that was kind of the tradition, and now suddenly red teaming has become much more than just being the guy who attacks or the people who attack. I think this is kind of a typical buzzwordy thing in the information security space, but suddenly red teaming is kind of what it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as it's always red teaming. You're doing vulnerability scan, it's red teaming. You're port scanning something, it's red teaming. You're, I don't know, writing a report, it's red teaming. So we're kind of moving away from the word red teaming, because when I talk to clients, they say red teaming, but we mean widely different things. And if I choose like 5 people here right now and ask them like define red teaming, well, we'll get 5 different answers. I'm certain of it. So we've shifted to the kind of more adversary simulation, emulation stuff, but also, namely, the name offensive security. So offensive security is basically just attacking stuff. It's penetration testing, I guess. It's and they go ignore the company named offensive security. They just messed it all up. But yeah, luckily they renamed, so that's good. As offensive security practitioners, then, we gain access to a ton of data. I'm not sure if everyone realizes that when we do penetration testing or are doing a security assessment or something like that, but the amount of data we get access to is pretty large. And the amount of data that we're able to process manually for us is very limited. I don't know, if there's any penetration testers here, how many file shares have you read? For hours, just reading files, trying to figure out documentation, trying to figure out how stuff like hooks together in this environment. Yeah, multiple hours just looking, trying to find that one thing that's gonna like take you further. That's one part of like the data you get access to, but also stuff like, I don't know, Bloodhound, information from AD, information from yeah, computers, yeah, all kinds of information. Some examples, like, yeah, there's information everywhere, right? And we're not kind of taking advantage of it. There's from Bloodhound, port scanning, your C2, whatever, and also your network web app scanning or stuff like that. So, and then now from the offensive security part, like, okay, we have all this data and stuff like that. How can we kind of take advantage of that? Well, I'm going to try to briefly like describe AI. And again, this is really from a practitioner type of view. So if you know this stuff, I'm sorry again, I'm gonna botch it. But the point being that you don't really have to be an expert to take or to utilize some of these tools that is kind of appeared the last year or the last periods. So it's important because people are very scared. Like not you guys in general, not you, but people in general are fairly scared of AI. Every time we have like a new thing, like when ChatGPT arrived, suddenly it's gonna destroy the world or something like that. But it's important for us to define that we are still at the infancy stage of what AI can do for us. We have these concepts called ANI, AGI, and ASI, which is basically just artificial narrow intelligence, and then general intelligence, and then super intelligence. And narrow intelligence is basically a toddler or a kid just learning to like write or draw. It has a very narrow range of abilities. In the general intelligence type, well, we have an AI who's kind of on par with us humans or like grown-ups. They have all the capabilities that we have. And then again, we have like the SI, which would be Skynet and iRobot, and I don't know. We're very, very far away from that. We're still here, and there's like a ton of time until we're like over there. But unfortunately, people believe that it's all magic and it's like it's going to take over the world, but we're still here. It's still fairly understandable, even for me. When I took a master's degree in information security, and I was forced to do some AI stuff there, and data mining and stuff like that. And we primarily learned about supervised and unsupervised learning. We're not going to talk about that today, but it's still kind of relevant. Supervised is, well, machine learning in general is, it takes some input, like you give it a data set. You give it some data, usually a ton of it, kind of like the stuff that we already have, like in hint for the talk. But you give it some data, and in the supervised learning, if you use that, you pre-label the training sets, right? So take emails, for example. You have 10,000 good emails that you manually labeled as good, and then you have 10,000 bad emails that you manually label as bad. You train your model on that, and then you give it some random email, and it'll kind of classify it. That's supervising. You're helping it kind of decides on what it should do and not do. That's simplifying it, but yeah. Then you had unsupervised learning, which would be, I'm not going to help you, figure it out on your own. Very common for clustering, trying to find connections between things that we're maybe not able to see as humans. So it's very interesting in kind of social graphs or marketing analysis, and also recommendation engines. Looking at Amazon, for instance, being able to say, like, okay, with this huge corpus of data, if you buy this item, you're probably interested in that item, because there's not an Amazon employee who's like, yeah, if you buy this, you probably want to buy that. So there's no one like sitting manually labeling thousands of items. It's unsupervised, largely unsupervised. Then we have deep learning, and that's kind of the part we're going to go into in general in this talk. And then reinforced learning, that's again above my level, but goes more into robotics, more into training and rewarding a system, and then it learns from that. For the deep learning part, there's this new, well, it's not really new, but it's fairly new, like mainstream new, called generative AI. Because traditionally, these machine learning models haven't really produced anything. Like it's more like you ask it a question, or like you ask it to do something and it does that thing. It's not like generating stuff from thin air. But that's what's so cool about generative AI. We've already talked about LLMs, so you probably all know about ChatGPT. Some of you might have used Midjourney or Stable Diffusion for generating cool images, and we saw a talk earlier where I believe the images was produced using some type of generative AI, and also audio. And we're seeing audio being used, or should I say misused already, for faking people's voices, and that's real. Like that's actually something that's happening right now, and it's being used / misused by actors, threat actors. And many more. There's probably a ton more things you can actually like generate, but yeah. Just to go into LLMs, because that's kind of what we're gonna focus most on. I'm gonna simplify this very much, but it's gonna, it's just enough to kind of, isn't like the Dunning-Kruger curve, like you think you know about it, and then yeah. Anyways, so there are a neural network with trillions of weights. A neural network, again, this is a simplification, but it has some input parameters, and then it has tons of hidden layers that are weighted, or that have some impact or redirects, or I don't have a good way to describe it, but kind of the data you put in is transformed via going through all these nodes, and then you get an output node. And it's difficult to know exactly how it arrives at the conclusion it does, because this is built, or this is trained. So you give it a ton of data, it trains itself, and obviously it's not like, what's that, 12 nodes? It's trillions, right? And you train it on a lot of documents, and that's kind of the, if you kind of look at the news today, they talk about plagiarism. So people, it steals the information from the internet, and then it uses that in the model, and that's kind of true, kind of what it does. At least it kind of indexes, or it ingests all of that information, and then it builds these types of vector spaces. And vector spaces is very simplified. Now I'm using words because this model doesn't use words, but they use numbers that represent words, and those words have some sort of vector space that places them close to other words that relate to them. So if I read 1,000 documents about an apple, for instance, well, it could be the Apple computer or the iPhone. It could be an apple, or apple tree, apple, the fruit apple, or it could be an orange. And then it tries to kind of put those in a relation to each other, depending on what's most likely. Now, in modern, like complex LLMs, there are multiple vector spaces. And that's what gives it context. So if we have kind of context, if, for instance, like you ask ChatGPT, I want to know more about the Apple computer. Well, it's going to look and try to find the vector space where it's been trained on Apple and computers more in general than apples and fruit trees, for instance. So it has multiple different types of vector spaces that it can kind of use to create the context or the feeling that it understands what you're talking about. So that's, again, this is very simplified. But it's important because it answers this common misconception that LLMs are just copy-pasting stuff from the internet. And like, you know, copying snippets from here and there and like, gluing them together and like brushing it over, making sure it like it's syntactically correct. But that's not how it works at all. It ingests every word and then it calculates like the chance between each and every word, how likely they are to actually appear together. So it has no, and that's also why ChatGPT is unable to give you like the citation, because it doesn't have that. It's just trained its model to kind of I'm not going to say feel, because I'm not going to humanify AI, but it's just a score, like what's the most likely word to follow now. All right, so now the whole thing about the talk in general. Let's meet. Let's put offensive security and AI together. And just before I say anything about that, it's important. I wanted to touch on what Andre said. It's so funny because again he had the chance to say it first. But in my experience, we're generally late to the party when new technology arrives. We're very slow at adopting automation, DevOps, AI, SOAR, or whatever. Like any type of new technology, offensive security is fairly slow. And I believe that's because the stuff we do still works. There's really no need. And one could look at it and say, like, it's adding complexity, or it doesn't really matter. But for us to kind of push the field forward, I think it's important that we take that step back and look at this and like, is there any other way we can look at it? It was a wonderful suggestion, going to other developer conferences and seeing what they're talking about, because we kind of live in our own bubble. So we need to break out of that and try to look outside and try to see if there's anything else we can do. I assume that most of you already used ChatGPT. So this is going to be very, very obvious for you. But it's still, if there's someone here who's like, I didn't think that was possible. Well, that's why we have the low-hanging fruits. So just an example then. What can we as offensive operators use ChatGPT for? Well, for instance, we can make it write command line commands for us. This will be very simple. I botched the IP address on purpose. And it's funny because it also tells me that I'm an idiot and that's not a valid IPv4 address. I don't like its attitude, but I made sure to comment that later. But it still gives me like the stuff I wanted. And this is, that's in retrospect, it's a very, very simple command. But say you're writing, I don't know, how many use hashcat and like know every single parameter in hashcat for masks and for word lists and for all of that. I don't, but yeah, that might just be me. But then I can use this, obviously, to kind of just kickstart whatever I'm doing. Give me, and it's not always perfect, and we'll get back to that as well. But ChatGPT has read all the documentation. They already have ingested the documentation. I haven't. I haven't read the man page. Who does that? But yeah, so they have all the information already. Another thing you can do, and you can ask it for tool suggestions. Like, hey, I want to scan a bunch of IP addresses. How do I do that? And obviously, it gives you like you shouldn't make sure that you're doing it. I don't know, it could be unauthorized and stuff like that. But again, it still kind of gives you the information. You just have to wait for it to type out the first part. In that case, it gives me Nmap and masscan, which I guess would be what I would use, but it also suggests Zmap, and for some reason Angry IP Scanner for those who are gonna take the certified ethical hacker exam. But another cool thing that I didn't prompt it to do, I didn't ask it to give me that information, but it suggests Showdown and Census as an alternative way to acquire that information. Well, it's obviously not really what I wanted, but it could be a good way, could be a good way to learn about something else, or to like reconsider. Maybe I don't need to scan this IP space range. Maybe I can just look it up in Shodan. And obviously, you're not going to get all the ports because Shodan doesn't scan all the ports. But maybe that's not the point. So that's very interesting. Again, I didn't ask it to give me any options. I wanted to scan some IPs, and this is what it gave me. So as a kind of a learning tool as well, I think it's a good idea to use it. Also, I title is help getting an overview, but also kind of making stuff more systematic or parsing stuff. ChatGPT is very good. So this is, it is. I'm going to give it some IP addresses with some ports. I want it to kind of tell me what are those ports and classify which of those assets are more likely to be vulnerable than another. Is there anyone who's want to take a bet on which of those IPs would be like the worst? No fans of Telnet here. No, that's fine. So again, it's going to give you, and it's fairly pretty as well. Gives you an overview, and it even has like port 1337, often used for elite or hacker services. Sounds cool. It highlights the telnet part, and I guess the coolest part is, okay, it's going to give you a vulnerability analysis and tell you about all the different types of ports. And again, I didn't really ask for this, but that's what it gave me, and it's a good indicator that, okay, maybe I should look into those services. And to kind of finish off the result it gave me, well, we consider the most vulnerable to be telnet and FTP. And then potentially vulnerable, and then probably not as vulnerable. And again, this obviously isn't perfect, but it might give you kind of an idea of where to look first, for instance. It can also, help you write reports. Obviously, you got to be careful copy pasting data into ChatGPT. In my professional opinion, if what ChatGPT returns is something that I can stand for, do I have to write all of that process just to like say it's mine? I'm not sure. Like, people copy paste anyways from the internet. And again, it's going to give you a ton of information. And what's also cool is that it's going to give you information like, obviously explaining what SQL injection is, which is what I initially wanted. Like, I wanted to like have something to copy paste into a report. But it's also saying, oh well, some of the malicious actions you could do could be like reading sensitive data, modifying data, possibly executing commands, which I think you could use as kind of a indicator where you could say, oh, maybe I should go back and revisit that SQL injection that I discovered and make sure to see if I can actually hit those malicious actions and see if those are possible. So it's kind of a way to give yourself kind of a checklist to okay, do more and kind of really prove that the SQL injection you found is good. And obviously, I wouldn't copy paste all of this into a report. That would be too much irrelevant information. But it's nice as kind of a tool for guiding you. It can also create some horrible PowerPoints. I tried just for fun to generate PowerPoint based on this presentation, and it gave me absolutely nothing. So, or it gave me this, but yeah, barely usable. But what's cool about this, it gives you the Python code, or it shows you the Python code that it used to generate the slides. That's an add-on you have to turn on in ChatGPT. But what's so cool then is you could take the PowerPoint code, and in theory, you could create your own report to presentation Python script and just, slap on your own theme. And in theory, you could like, yeah, sure, I can create that presentation. And then you like hit a button and you have the presentation. So that's also cool. Automation, again. It's very relevant when it comes to reporting, because that's a very, very sad process. So again, kind of back to all of that data we talked about. Now, obviously, all that data that we receive from Bloodhound or from whatever tool we're running, we can't really paste that into ChatGPT. That wouldn't be like good. So what I'm going to show now is outdated, or probably already outdated, because this is a field that's moving very fast. It's running ahead. But as an example, you have projects like Private GPT, which you can run on your own machine. It requires some decent GPU power, but in general, you can kind of create your own ChatGPT and then base it on the documents or the data that you have available. And it's built with LangChain, GPT4All, Chroma, and Llama CPP and sentence transformers. These are all building blocks that are, all of those building blocks are always getting better. So again, this might not be the best option for running stuff on your own right now, but it's, again, it's moving so fast. What's so cool about this in particular is because it uses LangChain, it's able to ingest all of these types of files. So everything from plain text TXT files to Evernote to EPUB to Markdown, or even something as cool as Outlook messages. Just like Outlook. I was gonna say there's one more, EML. So in theory, you can ingest a wide variety of stuff that you find during a pen test into this. And just to kind of give an idea, you're probably all familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, which is a library of tactics, techniques, and common knowledge for what you do during each stage of your, offensive operation. It contains 1,000 different sub-techniques that all generate more data, which is would be interesting to look at. And this is my attempt at putting all of MITRE into one slide, which always fails. But make sure you can read that, because there's a Kahoot afterwards. So one tool that generates data would be FOCA, or FOCA, fingerprinting organizations with collected archives. Often used in the reconnaissance phase. If you're it uses Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo for searching for files related to the company you're looking up. So, say you're looking at Kovert, it would try to find PDFs or any type of file that contains the word Kovert or are related to Kovert. And that's something you could ingest easily. File shares, we already talked about file shares. ManSpider is a tool which doesn't necessarily fit into this category, or like the private GPT part as well. But what it does is it looks through, it uses regular expression, and it searches through all the files in a file share. But what you could do instead is just take all the files from the file share and ingest them into private GPT, and then you can have it searchable there instead. It wouldn't be as straightforward as this. You can't just run regular expression inside of a LLM. That's not how it works, unfortunately, and we'll get kind of back to that. But that might be one way to do that type of ingestion. Another very cool tool is from a guy named Flangevik. He created a tool where if you're able to compromise a Microsoft account, online account, it's able to exfiltrate data like emails, Skype, not Skype, sorry, team messages, calendar, and stuff like that. And that's, again, is something you could ingest. Like, you could ingest the chat, you could ingest all the emails, and then you can start prompting into that. So, is it as easy as just ingesting it? Well, you have to remember that it's not like the LLM knows what you're doing. It's not like it knows that the stuff I'm ingesting now it doesn't know what you're going to do with it. So when you prompt it, you can't just say, give me a password that you found in some documentation, because it doesn't know what the password is, probably. It's not kind of capable of that. But you can probably, and this is again depending on kind of the development of these free or available LLMs, start asking it like, where's your backup server located? Where's your, what's the, like, you can ask it more configuration types of questions. And that was also mentioned in a talk earlier about, taking documentations and putting them into kind of LLMs type of systems. And I believe that's something that's very in its infancy, but it's going to be more and more relevant. Think about ingesting someone's Confluence, for instance, into a LLM and being able to actually read it and not just waiting for the thing to load. And then, again, prompt into it. Just want to mention common pitfalls. There are some things you need to remember when working with these types of tools or projects. First of all, obviously, the stuff you put into it is also basically the stuff you get out of it. So if you have any type of bias in your data set, that's obviously going to reflect in the result you're getting. So some say, shit in, shit out, and that's kind of goes for this as well. And I guess that's AI in general. Also, misinformation. Again, back to the stuff that you're ingesting, and this is also a thing that people are discussing regarding LLMs. Is it just ingests stuff from all over the internet, right? So if you're able to, like, if it suddenly parses some flat earther website or something, it could in theory be make it believe, or like you can end up prompting and saying that the word is flat. So and it has no it has no context. It doesn't know that that's necessarily wrong or right, only depending on the weight. So if someone publishes a ton of flat Earth theories, well, in theory, ChatGPT is going to start saying that the world is flat, because it's just calculations, right? What's most likely. Another very important part is hallucination, and this is something that people really haven't been able to wrap their head around when trying to prompt stuff, especially in ChatGPT. The model will try its very, 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 very best to give you what it thinks you want. So if you ask ChatGPT what is Martin's phone number, it's going to give you a number. It's not going to be mine. I'm fairly sure. Yeah, I'm fairly sure. But it's still like it's like this is the most likely thing I could come up with, and that's what you get. And that goes for kind of all of it. So you have to take everything it kind of gives you with a large grain of salt. It can hallucinate, and that's a problem. And that's kind of the pitfall with people who don't understand that when they use ChatGPT. It's like asking ChatGPT to figure out if a text has been written with ChatGPT. It's very, very bingo. And also back to kind of the ownership of generated content, we can kind of avoid that in general by ingesting stuff that we, privately ingest stuff that we only use for that engagement. But I mean, it would be interesting to take all the reports you've ever written, all the information you ever gathered, and like smash them into one model and see kind of what it gives you. Is it ethical? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But also, again, the generated content. The thing is, again, back to it's not copy pasting stuff. It doesn't have a database of like this came from there and that's it doesn't have it's nothing like that. So it's something that needs to be considered and hopefully avoided by going offline instead of using, for instance, ChatGPT for stuff that it shouldn't have access to. I'm getting thirsty, so thank you for your time. We do some cyber stuff if you want to contact us. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Martin. We do a couple questions. Does anybody have questions? Yeah.
Uh-oh.
He's thirsty. Watch out.
Have you used this on engagements with customers?
In general, yes.
What are your experiences regarding, as you said, the models tend to stick to the information that they know from before. What's your experience with how often the model hallucinates? What are your experiences with trying to ingest all of this random data into a model that has not been, to some extent, it's probably not been trained extensively on the new information?
Yeah.
How?
It's not. It's still in its infancy. That's it's not where I want it to be, and it's easy to kind of dream up scenarios where you can like ask it to do whatever you want, like give me all the information about every Windows host or whatever. It's not there yet. That could be fixable with restructuring the data before ingesting it, better language models. It's still a work in progress. What it's decent at is taking emails and kind of not necessarily parsing them, but parsing them, but not necessarily recalling them, because again, it's not able to recall anything. But typing something in the word of something else, and this goes back to kind of the context and the vector spaces. But it is able to kind of say, if I wanted you to write this in the voice of the CEO, it's ish able to do that. But again, it's not perfect. We tested it. It's not our daily driver, but yeah.
Anybody else have questions for Martin Ingesen about possible uses of AI in offensive security operations? Yes, coming your way. Keep your hand up. Thank you.
Have you seen any changes in restrictions regarding what information it will give you, considering that they're kind of cutting down on what information you can get?
The information I get from the model, you think?
Yeah, in terms of offensive security, that it won't allow.
Yeah. So the nice thing about running stuff on your own is that you don't have the guardrails. So like for ChatGPT, as you already saw, it kind of tells you like you need to don't use this for malicious purposes, and that's a part of the ChatGPT model that it's not necessarily trained on that, but it has guardrails kind of around it, if that makes sense, to kind of protect the model from doing stuff that OpenAI doesn't want it to do. If you run it on your own, you don't have those guardrails. So that's kind of. But my experience has been that it's been more relaxed. It's not as restrictive, and it's not shouting at you as soon as it kind of feels like you're trying to hack. So ChatGPT as well kind of feels more like, yeah, it gives you warning, but it still gives you basically the result you're after. So it seems like they kind of tuned that a bit down, but that could be anecdotal.
Okay, so for GPT, exploit code and stuff like that, there hasn't been any stronger restrictions going forward than what it was, say, a few months ago, that you have seen?
So from my experience, no. It's, if anything, it's become more relaxed, and also the thing is kind of bypasses for those type of guardrails that are so common now. You know, it's like my grandmother used to write exploit code, and I would love to like learn something from blah blah blah, and then it kind of for some reason kind of bypasses those guardrails, and suddenly it gives you exploit code. What's worth mentioning is that the code it gives you is usually like crap at best, and you have to like tune it and help it to tune it. But in general, it doesn't. The guardrails are generally bypassable.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Martin? I have a question. You said it wouldn't be a good idea to paste client IP addresses into ChatGPT. what about pasting client IP addresses into the enterprise chat GPT?
Well, again, I'm not a lawyer.
No, but to qualify a little bit, when we in the VIPS talk from Nora and Kenneth, they talked about app attest, right? So if we use app attest, then Google tells us we can trust this app, but then we still have to trust Google, right? So how much do we trust Google? How much do we trust Chat GPT? And it's not is it legal, but
yeah.
How much
That's
do we trust?
that's a good point. And a thing that I want to add is I mentioned that we're all often very late to the party. Like chatbots that builds on LLMs are already being built into Office, for instance. It's already reading your email. At least it has the capability to do that, and it's a toggle away. And at some point in some organization, that's going to happen. So at some point you have to trust someone, I guess. We like at Kovert, we try to avoid that by self-hosting as much as we can, but yeah, it's again, you have to someone has to have your email anyway. If it's Microsoft, like, why not give Microsoft and again, it has Defender and Defender for Endpoint. It already knows your IP addresses, so by giving it doesn't give you anything else in general.